An elderly woman brought a modest, handmade gift for her granddaughter's birthday. Everyone laughed, mocked her in front of the entire living room, but no one knew that inside was something priceless: her family's legacy and a ring worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you're touched by this story, put a like, subscribe to the channel, and be sure to share the video with your friends. Margaret Henderson stood in the warm glow of her study lamp, her fingers trembling slightly as she tied the final ribbon around the leather-bound album. The soft brown leather had darkened with age, and the faint scent of oil and old paper rose from the pages. Pages she had spent 3 months compiling. Each one bore careful curation: faded photographs, yellowed letters, handwritten recipes in lupin cursive, newspaper clippings from local press mentions, pressed wildflowers from the garden by the lake house, and, in the center, a stitched pocket hidden beneath a stitched family tree. Tucked deep inside was her grandmother's emerald ring, one that had traveled through 4 generations of Henderson women, a symbol of continuity, resilience, and history. She had debated, briefly, whether to include the ring. It had been hers since she was a teenager, gifted by her own mother the night before Margaret's wedding to John. But she wasn't sentimental for the stone itself. She was sentimental for what it represented: the memory of hands passing it forward, the quiet acknowledgement, "You are now the keeper." She had thought Olivia would be the next, a woman in her own right, preparing for marriage, ready, at least in Margaret's eyes, for something deeper than surface sparkle. Outside, rain pattered against the windows in soft murmurs. Her old cat, Peaches, curled on the windowsill, snoring gently. Margaret looked around the study, lined with overflowing bookshelves, old maps, glass cabinets filled with souvenirs from a lifetime of travel and a marriage that had spanned 4 decades. This room, more than any other, felt like the truth of her. The album, now resting in her lap, was in many ways a distillation of that truth. Tomorrow was Olivia's birthday, 27, not a child, not yet wise. Margaret had watched her granddaughter grow from a shy toddler who clutched her fingers tightly on windy walks around the lake house to a poised young woman with a sharp jawline and an impeccable wardrobe, her presence now curated like a social media profile. But Margaret had always believed, hoped, that beneath the polished sheen was still the girl who once called her Grandma Mags and begged for her cinnamon rolls. She placed the album gently into a gift bag lined with tissue paper, checking the handwritten card once more. "To Olivia, a piece of our family for your next chapter. Love, Grandma." The next afternoon, Margaret stood in the marbled lobby of the Pemberley Club downtown, clutching the gift bag with both hands. It was the kind of place where every chandelier twinkled with casual wealth, and the staff greeted guests by surname. The birthday party was held on the rooftop, exclusive, of course. Olivia's fiancé, Nathan, worked in private equity and was known for his taste in venues and disdain for subtlety. The guest list included tech founders, Instagram influencers, an interior designer who claimed she styled estates for 3 presidents, and Olivia's childhood friends, most of whom now lived in New York and posted daily day-in-the-life content. Margaret hadn't been sure what to wear. She'd settled on a navy silk blouse and her late husband's lapel pin, a small gold compass he had worn through every trip they'd taken together. A quiet nod to her own history in a room that no longer seemed to care for it. When the elevator doors opened onto the rooftop garden, laughter floated like perfume across the air. String lights crisscrossed the glass canopy, and servers in white gloves weaved through the crowd with flutes of champagne and miniature lobster rolls. The playlist was curated, the charcuterie towered, and Margaret felt immediately like a prop at the wrong kind of stage play. Olivia spotted her from across the room and waved, not without a trace of surprise. Margaret walked toward her, pausing at the cluster of elegantly dressed guests that surrounded the birthday girl. "Grandma, you made it." Olivia's smile was dazzling, her makeup flawless, her dress pale gold with sequined sleeves that shimmered under the lights. Nathan stood beside her, tall and sculpted, with the demeanor of someone who could price your worth in seconds. Margaret offered the gift bag, which looked modest beside the glossy boxes already piled on a lacquered gift table. Chanel, Louis Vuitton, a box with Cartier printed in gold. "I made you something," Margaret said gently. "Something for your future." Olivia accepted the bag, giving it a cursory glance before setting it aside. "Thank you, Grandma." She turned back to her friends without missing a beat. Margaret stepped away, scanning the crowd for anyone she might know. There was none. No John, her son, no Vanessa, her daughter-in-law. Both had texted that morning about last-minute work conflicts. Margaret took a glass of water from a passing tray and sat in a chair near the floral arch where Olivia would pose for pictures later. Time passed in a blur of clinking glasses and curated laughter. Then Vanessa arrived, out of breath but composed, and clinked her glass to get the room's attention. "Time for gifts." A circle formed, cameras lifted. Olivia began with the smaller boxes, making practiced expressions of delight. A Dior clutch from a friend in marketing, a signed first edition from Nathan, coached sentimentality. A trip to Positano from her future in-laws. Then she reached for Margaret's gift. She opened it delicately, pulling the album free. For a moment, silence. Margaret straightened in her chair. "What is this?" Olivia asked, her voice lifting with confusion. "A family archive," Margaret replied softly. "A record of where you come from and what you carry forward." Olivia flipped through a few pages. A baby photo, a postcard from the 70s, a recipe card. "Oh, wow," she said flatly. "Scrapbooking. Retro." Laughter bubbled from someone near her elbow. Nathan leaned in to glance. "Charming," he said with a smirk. Olivia held the album in one hand, showing it off like an ironic treasure. "You know, we have a registry, right?" The room laughed. Not maliciously, but enough to cut. "It's very you, Grandma," Olivia added, setting it down beside a box of rare wine. Margaret felt her face flush, her hands clenched in her lap. She had imagined many reactions, tears, gratitude, quiet reverence. She had not imagined this. A server passed with champagne. Margaret declined. She stood, smoothing her blouse, and exited through the glass doors without another word. No one stopped her. Back home, the house felt cavernous. She placed her handbag on the entry table, removed her shoes, and walked barefoot into the kitchen. The night was cool, the rain had stopped, and Boston's skyline blinked through her windows like a distant constellation. She poured a small glass of wine, opened the drawer beside the sink, and pulled out a photograph of her wedding day. Her hand in John's, the emerald ring glittering in the sunlight. She had imagined passing that ring to Olivia during the wedding. Quietly. Just before the ceremony. A secret between women who carried legacies. Now, she wondered if Olivia would have even looked inside the album before her honeymoon. Margaret sat at the kitchen table, the wine untouched beside her, and stared at the photo. She had wanted to gift history. Instead, she had been erased from it. The morning after the party, Margaret woke before sunrise. The house was still dark, the silence only broken by the soft tick of the antique wall clock in the hallway. She sat at the edge of her bed, still dressed in yesterday's clothes. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap, unmoving. On the nightstand, her phone blinked with a single notification, a follow-up email from Vanessa with the subject line, "Wedding Logistics, Urgent." She didn't open it immediately. Instead, she stood, went to the window, and pulled back the curtains. Outside, the first light was just beginning to tint the skyline pink and amber. Her reflection ghosted in the glass, a silhouette in a room that no longer felt warm. When she finally opened the email, her heart began its slow, insistent thud. Vanessa had attached vendor contracts, invoices, and a carefully detailed event itinerary. Olivia and Nathan's wedding was scheduled to take place at Margaret's lake house in Vermont. Caterers, decorators, florists, all booked. Dates were set. Work crews would begin modifications in 2 weeks. The tone of the message was transactional. It thanked Margaret for her generous contribution and included a line about approval by signature. There was no question. No invitation to participate in planning. No mention of the album or the ring or her abrupt departure from the party. Just a closing. Let us know if you need help removing any furniture before the designer begins work. Margaret read the sentence 3 times. Then she rose, went to the closet, pulled on a cardigan, and walked to the garage. The keys to the Vermont house were still hanging from the same hook they'd occupied for 30 years. She took them in hand, slid into her car, and without fully understanding why, began to drive. The early morning roads were quiet. She passed under the arch of trees that lined the interstate just past Lexington, where the maples had begun their slow transformation into autumn fire. Her hands gripped the steering wheel harder than necessary, her knuckles pale and aching by the time she reached the quiet highway that wound into Vermont. The drive took longer than usual. Her mind drifted to the years she and John had spent there. They'd bought the house in their 40s. Small, old, in need of restoration. They'd saved for years to afford it. Every summer, they'd work on it together, painting, sanding, planting. Their children had learned to swim in the cove just beyond the dock. Olivia had once caught her first firefly there, dancing barefoot in the dusk. When Margaret turned into the gravel driveway, she saw a black SUV parked near the porch. She hadn't told anyone she was coming. Her chest tightened as she stepped out of the car. Inside, the front door creaked open with that familiar old sigh, but the sound that followed was unfamiliar, a woman's voice speaking in clipped, professional tones. Margaret stepped inside and froze in the hallway. The great room, the heart of the house, was already mid-transformation. Furniture had been pushed aside, drop cloths covered the hardwood floors, and a woman with a sleek bob and tablet in hand gestured toward the kitchen wall. "This wall can come down," the woman said confidently. "It'll really open the space and create a more dramatic flow between the kitchen and the reception area. Mrs. Henderson won't mind. She's rarely here." Margaret stepped forward. "Actually, I do mind." The woman spun, startled. Beside her stood Olivia and Vanessa, both dressed in casually coordinated outfits, the kind that suggested wealth without effort. Olivia's face drained of color. Vanessa recovered first, smiling in that way people do when they've been caught but refuse to acknowledge wrongdoing. "Margaret," she said too brightly, "what a lovely surprise. We were just discussing some light updates for the wedding." Margaret looked around the room, once filled with the family Christmases, with candlelight and laughter and barefoot children dragging sand in from the dock. Now it looked like a stranger's project. "Taking down a weight-bearing wall is not a light update," Margaret replied, setting her purse down on the sideboard. Vanessa opened her mouth, but Olivia cut in, her voice syrupy sweet. "Grandma, don't you remember? Last Christmas, you said we could use the house for the wedding. You said you wanted it to feel special." "I said you could use it," Margaret said quietly. "I didn't agree to demolition." The designer stepped forward, all charm and assertiveness. "It's not demolition exactly. We're talking about modernization. The bones of the place are lovely, but the aesthetic is a bit dated. We're aiming for a kind of Hamptons chic elegance, Instagrammable but timeless." Margaret turned away from her, walking slowly to the living room window. The lake shimmered under the afternoon sun, gentle waves kissing the rocky shore. It was the same view she and John had toasted every anniversary to. She remembered the exact spot on the dock where his ashes had been scattered. "Where's the photo that was on the mantel?" she asked, not turning around. Vanessa gave a vague wave of her hand. "We packed up a few personal things to keep them safe during the changes. It's all carefully stored." Margaret didn't respond. That night, after they'd left, Vanessa offering a patronizing pat on the shoulder, Olivia avoiding her eyes, she went to the garage. There, against the far wall, were 3 cardboard boxes labeled M. Henderson, personal. She knelt, the concrete floor cold beneath her knees, and opened the first. Inside was the photograph from the mantel, the one of her and John on their 40th anniversary. Alongside it were his books, their wedding album, and, tossed with careless indifference, the family album she had given Olivia, still unopened, still pristine. The emerald ring remained inside. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was John. "Mom," the message read, "Vanessa found a wonderful retirement community in Brookline. She made an appointment for us to tour it next week. Just to look." Margaret stared at the message for a long moment. Then she deleted it without replying. Through the garage's grimy window, she saw the last rays of sun dip behind the trees, casting the lake in a golden hush. This was her home, her memories, her history. And somehow it had been repurposed into a venue, a prop. No more. She returned to the house, closed the door behind her, and locked it with finality. In the morning, she would begin making calls. Not to wedding planners, not to caterers, to a lawyer, to a real estate agent, and, most importantly, to herself. For the first time in her life, she would no longer apologize for taking up space. 2 days after returning from Vermont, Margaret sat in the sterile quiet of Dr. Greer's office, her back straight in the cushioned chair, hands folded neatly in her lap. The doctor, a man in his early 60s with thinning gray hair and an expression that balanced concern with clinical distance, scanned her chart in silence. His glasses slid to the tip of his nose. "Your blood pressure is significantly higher than your last visit," he finally said, tapping the screen. "And your cortisol levels are elevated. Are you experiencing any unusual stress lately?" Margaret gave a small smile, too tired to offer pretense. "Some family tension," she replied, her voice quiet. Dr. Greer looked over his glasses, then set the tablet down. "At your age, stress isn't just unpleasant, it's dangerous. We don't talk about it enough, but emotional trauma, especially sustained stress from interpersonal conflict, can trigger serious events, heart attacks, strokes, cognitive decline." She nodded, the clinical framing strangely reassuring. It confirmed that what she was feeling wasn't dramatic or overblown. It was real, physiological, dangerous. After the appointment, Margaret didn't go home immediately. She took a cab to Back Bay, where the brick sidewalks and Victorian brownstones brought a faint sense of familiarity. She called her oldest friend Evelyn, who arrived at their usual cafe wearing a long wool coat and a silk scarf tied like a French film star. They hugged briefly, and Evelyn ordered coffee before sitting with a dramatic sigh. "Tell me everything," she said. Margaret did. She spoke in low, even tones, explaining the birthday humiliation, the silent decision to use her lake house, the plans to demolish walls, the labeled boxes in her garage, and, most recently, the email about the retirement tour. Evelyn listened in rare silence, her fork frozen midway to her lemon tart. "And the album?" Evelyn finally asked. "The ring?" "They never opened it," Margaret replied. "They laughed, called it retro, set it aside like a pity gift." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "That's not just rude, that's a sign. They don't see you anymore, Margaret. Not as a person. You're an institution to them, a symbol, a financial mechanism, not a woman." Margaret's hands trembled slightly as she wrapped them around her teacup. "They're my family, Evie." Evelyn leaned forward. "There's a difference between family and people who exploit your kindness. You can love them, but don't let them use you, especially not now." They walked together afterward, the afternoon sun casting long shadows down Commonwealth Avenue. Margaret didn't feel lighter, but she did feel seen. That night, as she fed Peaches and set the kettle to boil, her phone rang again. It was Luke, her grandson, the only one who hadn't laughed, the only one who had looked her in the eyes that day. "Hi, Grandma." His voice came through, soft and hesitant. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" She sat, her tea forgotten. "Are you okay?" he asked. "You left the party kind of suddenly. I mean, I understood why." "I'm fine," she said gently. "Just tired." "I thought you should know something," he continued. "Dad left some financial papers in the printer at home. I saw them by accident. It didn't look good." Margaret's pulse quickened. "What kind of papers?" "Investment reports, a second mortgage notice, some red flag letters from the bank. Grandma, I think they might be counting on your money to get out of this." After they hung up, Margaret sat in the dim kitchen, the laptop open in front of her. She logged into her online banking. Within moments, a security flag popped up. 3 failed login attempts in the past 7 days, from an unrecognized device. Her stomach twisted. She clicked through her recent account views, noticed nothing withdrawn, but the intent was clear. Someone had been trying to access her funds without her permission. The illusion was shattered. This wasn't about wedding venues. It wasn't about design choices or generational misunderstanding. This was about desperation dressed as concern. She pulled open her file cabinet and gathered her documents: title deeds, investment statements, trust certificates, insurance policies. Then she reached for the small envelope John had left months ago, the one she'd ignored. Inside were 2 printed brochures for high-end retirement communities, each with handwritten notes. One circled floor plan read, in Vanessa's looping cursive, "Perfect for Mom, lots of sun, small kitchen, less temptation to cook." The smile she gave at that moment was so bitter it surprised even her. Small kitchen, less temptation to cook, as if her passion for baking was now an inconvenience to be managed. She placed all the documents in a manila folder and left them on her desk. The next morning, she called Marcus Cole. He had been John's mentor once, back when John was still idealistic, still passionate about justice. Marcus had attended their family barbecues, sent Christmas cards for years. But as John's career rose and his ambition sharpened, they had drifted. Margaret hadn't spoken to Marcus in a long while, but his voice on the other end was warm, if surprised. "Of course I remember you, Margaret," he said. "What can I do for you?" I need to meet," she said privately. "It's about my assets and my family." There was a pause. Then, "Bring everything you have. And Margaret, come alone." They met that afternoon at a quiet corner cafe near Cambridge. Marcus had aged, more white in his beard, a slight stoop to his shoulders, but his handshake was firm and his eyes still sharp. Margaret laid out the documents across the table. Marcus reviewed each one in silence, occasionally asking a clarifying question. When they finished, he leaned back and let out a long, low breath. "This is serious," he said. "I know." He tapped one of the bank statements. "This investment fund, this is in John's name?" "It's a shared investment," she said. "He convinced me to add him 5 years ago, said it would make things simpler. It was modest then. Now it's the biggest liability." Marcus nodded. "The losses are substantial. And the second mortgage? That's on his home?" She nodded. "He's underwater, and you're the life raft." Margaret didn't flinch. "You need to protect yourself," Marcus said firmly, "immediately. Start by severing access to all joint assets. Move your funds into new accounts. Establish a trust, controlled solely by you, and sell anything that they might try to leverage without your consent." She sipped her tea, steady and deliberate. "I've already decided to sell the lake house." His eyebrows lifted. "That will cause an uproar." "I'm aware. There are legal options, too. You could file for financial protection orders. Remove John from the investment account entirely." She shook her head. "Not yet. I want to be smart, not punitive." He studied her a moment, then nodded. "All right. What about your will?" "I'll need to revise it." "Good. And the wedding?" "It's supposed to be in September, at the lake house, without my permission." "Then perhaps it's time you exercise some." As they stood to leave, Marcus touched her shoulder gently. "You're doing the right thing, Margaret. Most people wait too long. They want to believe their family will come to their senses." "I've waited long enough," she said quietly. That evening, she called her bank and spoke with the manager about the suspicious activity. New access protocols were added, security questions changed, account transfers paused. Then she opened the email from Olivia. It was a new vendor request, $18,000 for flowers. Next to it, a forwarded brochure for a different retirement facility, this one further from Boston. Vanessa had written in the subject line, "More affordable option. We can arrange a tour next week." Margaret didn't respond. Instead, she called Marcus again. "I've made my decision," she said. "I want to move forward with everything we discussed." "Are you sure? Once this starts, it's hard to undo." "I'm sure." Outside, the Boston skyline glittered. The city where she'd built her life. A life that had somehow been reshaped, hijacked, distorted beyond recognition. But now, for the first time, she was about to reclaim it. And this time, she would not ask for permission. It began with a phone call, the kind that opens a door you can no longer close. Jennifer Maxwell's voice, crisp and professional, came through the speaker as Margaret stood by the window in her kitchen, watching golden leaves drift along the sidewalks below. "I've identified 3 potential buyers," Jennifer said. "All private, all vetted. One in particular, a tech entrepreneur from San Francisco, has expressed strong interest in properties like yours. Quiet transactions, high-value locations, minimal paperwork. He could make a full cash offer within 30 days. If you're serious, we should move now." "I'm serious," Margaret replied. She ended the call, turned from the window, and went to her desk. There, waiting in a folder labeled "Important," were the deeds to the Vermont Lake House and the trust documents Marcus had helped her draft. The folder also held something she hadn't touched in years, a handwritten list of goals John had made in law school. She had kept it, proud of his clarity and ambition, but reading it now, she saw only the line that said, "Make partner by 35, retire mom early." Not help mom retire, not ask what she wants. Retire her, as though she were a project or an obligation. That night, she took out her leather suitcase, John's graduation gift to her years ago, and began to pack. Not her clothes. Not yet. But the irreplaceable things. Photo albums, her husband's journals, the bronze figurine he had given her on their 10th anniversary, and the small cedar box that held a portion of his ashes. The things the family wouldn't miss because they had never truly seen them. The things she couldn't leave behind. She drove up to the lake house the following day. The sky was low and gray, threatening rain. As she stepped inside, the air felt heavier than usual, as though the house itself knew what was coming. Room by room, she moved carefully. In the living room, she pulled down swatches of fabric and paint samples taped to the wall. In the guest room, already labeled as bridal prep in a scrawled marker on the floor plan, she found a stack of wedding magazines and a vision board pinned to the cork wall. Images of models, color palettes, floral designs. The room was staged like a dream not her own. In her bedroom, she discovered the final insult. The books she kept on her nightstand, poetry collections, a copy of Anne Morrow Lindbergh's Gift from the Sea, and a novel by her favorite author, had been replaced with wedding planning guides and a schedule breakdown that read, "Mother of the bride arrival, TBD." TBD. She, the owner of the house, had become an unknown variable in her own space. She sat on the porch swing John had built, watching the lake churn under the wind. For decades, this view had been her place of peace, the one spot where nothing artificial could reach her. No appointments, no expectations. Just water, trees, and sky. Now it was a battleground, dressed up in white ribbons and Instagram filters, rebranded as a backdrop for someone else's curated milestone. Her phone buzzed beside her. A text from John. "Mom, need to discuss important financial strategy. Dinner tomorrow. Bring in Vanessa and our advisor." She didn't reply. Instead, she dialed Jennifer Maxwell. "I'd like to proceed with listing the property immediately," she said. "Discretion is still important." "Of course," Jennifer replied. "I'll arrange for photos and staging tomorrow. We'll keep everything private." 2 days later, Jennifer called again. "I've got your buyer. He's ready to match full asking price, all cash, with a 40-day close. He wants this done fast, quietly, and permanently." Margaret paused only briefly. "Tell him yes." That evening, she returned to the lake house for one final walkthrough before the photographer arrived. She moved slowly, touching the walls, running her fingers along the worn banister of the stairs, standing quietly in the kitchen where she had once taught Olivia to make blueberry pancakes. It was all still there, under the layers of intrusion. But it would never be hers again, not in the way it had been. She had taken back her autonomy, but in doing so, she was also closing a chapter, one that would not reopen. As she was locking up, a sleek black car pulled into the driveway. A young woman stepped out, holding a large folder and wearing all white. The wedding planner. Her name escaped Margaret, though she remembered the overly cheerful emails, the timelines and checklists, the assumption that everyone would fall into line. "Oh, Mrs. Henderson," she called out, startled. "I didn't expect anyone to be here. I'm just measuring for tent placement and parking flow." "No need," Margaret replied evenly. "The wedding plans have changed." The woman blinked. "I'm sorry? The house is no longer available." "But Olivia didn't say anything." "She doesn't know yet." Margaret got into her car and drove away, the planner still standing in the driveway with her phone halfway to her ear. Back in Boston, she invited Luke to dinner. They ate roast chicken, one of his favorites from childhood, and afterward she handed him an envelope. "It's for your photography business," she said. Luke opened it, eyes widening at the check inside. "Grandma, I can't." "You can, and you will. You're the only one who saw me." He nodded, speechless. Later that night, Margaret sat in her study. A quiet calm settled over her, deeper than any she had felt in months. She knew that by morning the news would spread, that Olivia would call, that John would rage, that Vanessa would try to mediate the disaster. She didn't care. This time she wasn't simply protecting her assets. She was protecting herself, at long last. It began, as she'd predicted, at precisely 11:23 p.m., with the sharp trill of her phone breaking the silence of her study. The screen lit up with John's name. She didn't answer. Then came the text messages, one after another. Amber, John, even Vanessa. The last message from her granddaughter stood out in all capitals. "Please tell me this isn't true." Margaret set the phone face down and returned to her book. She didn't read another word. In the morning, the storm gathered in full force. John arrived at her door before she'd finished breakfast, still in running clothes, sweat drying in cold patches on his temples. The moment she opened the door, he barged inside without greeting. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded. Margaret didn't answer. She moved calmly to the counter and poured herself a fresh cup of coffee. "Jennifer Maxwell," he continued, nearly breathless. "A private sale? Behind our backs? What were you thinking?" She stirred in cream, unhurried. "I was thinking it's time to simplify my life." "Simplify?" He let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "You're selling our family beach house weeks before Amber's wedding. That venue is locked. Deposits are made. The invitations are already out." "It's my beach house," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "And yes, I'm selling it." "You can't do this," he hissed. "We've made plans. The designer starts next week. Guests have booked flights. Do you know how much we've invested in this wedding?" "I suggest you start looking for an alternative venue," she replied. He paced, hands running through his thinning hair. "This is about the birthday party, isn't it?" Amber's comment. "She was joking, Mom. You're overreacting." She looked at him steadily over the rim of her cup. "This isn't about one comment. It's about a pattern of behavior, yours included." He froze. "What are you talking about?" "The retirement brochures, the financial strategy meetings, the unauthorized attempts to access my accounts, the plans to redesign a home I paid for and maintained for 40 years without my consent." He paled. "Those were for your benefit. You're getting older, Mom." "I'm old," she agreed. "Not incapable, and certainly not senile, though I imagine that narrative might serve your purposes." His expression crumpled for a moment, just a flicker of something human beneath the layers of entitlement. "I'm in trouble, Mom." "I know." "The Westridge development fell apart. The investors are threatening lawsuits. If I don't find capital—" "This is about money, then." He hesitated. "It's both. Money and family." "Then we're done here." He stared at her, then turned to go, pausing at the door. "You'd do this to your own granddaughter? To Amber?" She didn't answer. That afternoon, Amber showed up. She looked wrecked, eyes red-rimmed, mascara smudged, her designer coat buttoned wrong. She didn't knock, just stepped inside as if the urgency of her emotion excused the intrusion. "Logan is freaking out," she said before Margaret could speak. "His parents are mortified. Do you have any idea how this makes us look?" Margaret didn't flinch. "About as bad as I looked when you mocked my gift in front of a room full of strangers." Amber blinked, thrown off. "That was different. I was just being honest." "So am I. The house is being sold. The wedding will need a new venue." Amber's voice cracked. "Why would you do this to me?" "I'm not doing anything to you," Margaret said quietly. "I'm doing something for myself." Amber left in a flurry of tears and slammed doors. That evening brought an even more unexpected visitor. Logan. Margaret let him in, unsure whether curiosity or amusement was the stronger motive. "I wanted to talk to you," he said awkwardly, standing in her entryway with his hands shoved in his coat pockets. "Alone." She offered him tea. He declined. "I wanted to apologize," he said, "for laughing at your gift. It was disrespectful." Margaret studied him carefully, looking for the angle. "Why now?" "Because I'm starting to see things differently," he admitted. "The way everyone's reacting to your decision, it's shown me a side of this family I hadn't really noticed." She nodded slowly. "Careful observation is an undervalued skill. I don't know what Amber told you, but things between us weren't great, even before this. I imagined as much." "For what it's worth," he said, standing to go, "I think I understand why you're doing this." She didn't reply, but something in her chest shifted slightly. That night, she called Marcus to confirm the closing. "We're ready to proceed," she told him. "On schedule." 3 weeks before the closing, Jennifer called with a surprise. "The buyers want to accelerate," she said. "They're offering an extra $50,000 if we can close in 10 days. Margaret hesitated for a single heartbeat. "Tell them yes." She invited Luke to dinner again. "The sale is happening sooner," she told him over roast chicken. "Before the wedding?" he asked. "Yes." He set down his fork. "They're going to lose their minds." "Probably." "You know what's strange?" he said after a moment. "I think I respect you more now than I ever have. And I've always respected you." Her heart gave an unexpected tug. Later, as they cleared the dishes, he finally asked the question she'd been waiting for. "Is this because of what Amber said? About the album?" "It's because of what that moment revealed," she replied. "About how they see me, what they value. Some realizations can't be unlearned." That night, her phone buzzed with a new text from John. "Family dinner, tomorrow, 7 p.m. our house. Important matters to discuss." It wasn't an invitation. It was a summons. She called Marcus. "They're planning an intervention," she told him, "likely to claim I'm mentally incompetent." "Are you sure you want to attend?" he asked. "Absolutely. Running would only strengthen their narrative." The following evening, she dressed with meticulous care. A navy pantsuit John had once called powerful, pearl earrings, a silk scarf her husband had bought in Venice. She applied light makeup, pressed her lips together in the mirror. The woman who looked back at her was resolute, straight-backed, unyielding. When she arrived at John's home in Wellesley, it looked like a set. Lights blazing, curtains perfectly tied back. From the window she could see the guests assembled, John pacing, Vanessa adjusting place settings, Amber seated with a tissue in hand. Luke stood slightly apart, already uncomfortable. She rang the bell. John answered with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Mom, thank you for coming." The living room fell silent as she entered. On the coffee table were printouts, brochures for retirement communities, business cards for elder law attorneys, and a stack of blank power of attorney forms. Vanessa stepped forward first, her voice smooth. "We're here because we love you." "Are you?" Margaret said, placing her purse calmly on a side table. "That's interesting." John cleared his throat. "Mom, we're concerned. Your recent decisions seem impulsive." "You mean selling my own property?" "Exactly," Amber chimed in. 3 weeks before my wedding? It's cruel." Margaret looked around the room. "I disagree. It makes perfect sense. I've removed myself from a situation where I'm not respected." Vanessa jumped in. "Margaret, stress and age can cloud judgment. We're suggesting protections, nothing drastic." "For whom?" she asked. "For me? Or for your financial interests?" The silence was instant. Luke shifted but said nothing. "I know about the failed development," she continued. "The mortgage, the credit cards, the account access attempts. I know everything." John paled. "Who told you?" "Does it matter? What matters is that you tried to manipulate me instead of asking for help." Vanessa stepped forward. "Margaret, you're confused." "I've never been clearer," she cut in. "The house will be sold next week. The proceeds are under my control. And this little performance, it confirms I've made the right decision." She picked up her purse. "I have medical and legal documentation of my full mental competency, just in case any of you are considering legal action." As she reached the door, Amber called after her, voice breaking. "What about my wedding?" Margaret turned, her expression serene. "What about my dignity?" Then she left, and for the first time in a long, long time, Margaret Henderson smiled, not in victory, but in peace. The lake house was gone. Margaret signed the final closing documents in Marcus Cole's office on a bright September afternoon, the air crisp with the first hints of autumn. There was no fanfare, just quiet. The soft rustle of papers, the click of a pen, the final wire transfer confirmation. It was done. She had owned that house for nearly 40 years. Now it belonged to someone else. As Marcus slid the folder into his briefcase, he looked at her. "How do you feel?" "Untethered," Margaret replied. That night, she slept without dreams. The silence that followed the sale wasn't total. It was fractured by attempts, frantic ones, to reassert control. John left a voicemail. Cold, clipped, professional. "Mother, I'm disappointed you've proceeded with this reckless action. We need to discuss damage control immediately." Vanessa's message was longer, dripping with unearned martyrdom. "Margaret, I hope you realize what you've done to this family. Amber is absolutely devastated." Amber sent 16 texts in one night. The last one, riddled with typos and all caps, read simply, "My life is ruined and it's your fault." Margaret silenced her phone. Days passed. The world didn't end. She moved into her new condominium in Cambridge quietly. The building was modern, understated, secure. Her unit, on the 15th floor, had floor-to-ceiling windows and a private balcony that overlooked the Charles River. For the first time in years, she could look out and see nothing but open space. The furniture arrived in phases. The movers brought her essentials, books, rugs, the paintings she refused to leave behind. She left behind the heavy antiques, the dark floral upholstery, the colonial dining room set. In its place, she chose sleek, comfortable lines. She hired a local artist to paint the walls in soft, natural hues. No one asked her opinion. No one second-guessed her choices. No one suggested Pinterest boards or designer palettes. It was hers. 2 weeks after moving in, she invited Luke to dinner. He arrived with a bottle of red wine in a brown paper bag. "Housewarming gift," he said, placing both on the counter. Margaret opened the package after dinner. Inside was a framed photograph. The lake house at sunset, windows glowing, water sparkling with light. The moment was frozen in golds and silvers, as if the house itself had known it was being immortalized. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "When did you take it?" "Last summer. I always thought it looked the most alive at that time of day." She hung the photo near the balcony door where the morning sun would strike it. A memorial, not to the house, but to the memories within it. "I'm officially full-time with my photography now," Luke said over dessert. "2 gallery shows this winter, one here, one in Providence. I'm proud of you. Dad doesn't know yet," he admitted, "about the business, or the money you gave me." Margaret smiled. "Sometimes the right moment never arrives. Sometimes we have to create it." Later, after Luke left, she stood by the window with her tea, watching the river ripple beneath the city lights. For once, her phone remained silent. There were no demands, no obligations, no guilt-laced requests for money or favors, just stillness. 3 days later, Evelyn called. "I ran into Amber," she said without preamble. "At Bloomingdale's. She looked awful." Margaret closed her eyes. "How awful?" "She burst into tears, right there in Housewares, said she was returning wedding gifts." Margaret said nothing. "Whatever else she is," Evelyn added gently, "she's still your granddaughter." That afternoon, Margaret pulled out an old photo album. She flipped through pages. Olivia as a toddler with cake smeared on her face. Olivia at age 10, holding up a ribbon from the science fair. Olivia at 16, wearing braces and rolling her eyes at the camera. Somewhere along the way, the girl had become someone Margaret no longer recognized. She wasn't blameless either. She had delivered her retaliation with scalpel precision. She had known exactly what she was doing when she signed the sale contract, the impact on the wedding, the social fallout, the humiliation. She had justified it as self-preservation. And it was. But it had also been a message, one that rang louder than any apology ever could. That evening, her phone rang. John. "Mom," he began, hesitant. "Amber's not doing well." Margaret stood at the window, tea cooling in her hand. "She's not eating. She's not seeing anyone. She won't leave the apartment. Logan's already with someone new, publicly. His parents are washing their hands of the whole thing. Amber's collapsed under it all. Is she getting help? She refuses therapy, says it would be admitting defeat." Margaret sighed. "So, like our family, appearance over healing. Would you consider talking to her? Not to apologize. Just, maybe she needs to hear your voice. I'll think about it." That night, she drafted a message, then deleted it, then drafted it again. She finally sent a text. "Would you like to meet for coffee tomorrow?" Amber's reply came instantly. "Why? So you can gloat?" "No, so I can listen." A pause. "Fine. Cafe Nero, Newberry, 2:00. Margaret arrived early, choosing a quiet corner table near the window. She ordered chamomile tea and waited. Amber appeared precisely on time. She looked thinner, pale. Her dark sunglasses hid much of her face, but when she removed them, Margaret saw the damage: swollen eyes, hollow cheeks, a brittleness in her posture. "You look awful," she said before she could stop herself. Amber let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Thanks, Grandma. Always a straight shooter." Margaret gestured to the seat across from her. Amber sat, arms crossed tightly. "Logan's already dating someone new," she said after a moment. "Instagram official. 3 weeks after we called off the wedding. I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you?" Margaret didn't answer. You sold the house where I was supposed to get married. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" "I didn't know it would end your engagement," Margaret said, "but I knew there would be consequences. So it was worth it? To ruin everything?" Margaret looked at her granddaughter, trying to see past the anger. "How did you feel when you opened my gift?" Amber frowned. "What does that have to do with anything? Please, answer honestly." Amber looked down, embarrassed. Everyone else had given me expensive things. It looked homemade. I felt exposed, like it was a joke. "And did you consider how I might feel when you mocked it?" Amber didn't speak. "I wasn't just giving you an album, Amber. I was giving you a history, a piece of yourself, a family line, and yes, a ring." Amber's head snapped up. "What?" "My grandmother's emerald ring. I hid it in the album, in a secret pocket." Amber's mouth opened, but no words came. "I thought if you looked closely, really looked, you'd find it. But you didn't. You set it aside." Tears welled in Amber's eyes. "I threw it away that night. I thought, oh my God, I thought it was just paper. I didn't even open it." Margaret nodded. "Then the loss is shared." They sat in silence. For the first time in months, the distance between them felt fragile, breakable, repairable, if only slightly. "I'm in therapy now," Amber said softly. "Luke convinced me. It's helping. Slowly." Margaret offered a small smile. "Good." "I'm not ready to talk about everything yet," Amber added, "but maybe someday. I'll be here." They parted quietly. No hugs, no forgiveness, just a recognition, a shift. Later, alone in her apartment, Margaret sat by the window. The city pulsed below her, indifferent and eternal. In her hands, she held a soft cotton bag. Inside, nestled among folded linens and lavender sachets, were two items she thought she'd never see again: the family album and the ring. She'd gone digging in the trash after Amber left, just in case. Not all things, it seemed, were lost forever. Some were simply waiting to be found. 1 year to the day after the fateful birthday party, Margaret Henderson stood in her Cambridge condominium, watching the afternoon sun drift across her living room floor. The soft light kissed the walls, now adorned with framed family photos, abstract art, and one prominent piece: a photograph Luke had taken of the lake house just before the sale. It captured the structure, bathed in a golden glow, windows reflecting a stillness that no longer existed there. A memory, frozen, yet somehow breathing. Her apartment was modest compared to her old brownstone, but it suited her. Every object had purpose. Every chair invited conversation or solitude. Bookshelves climbed to the ceiling, filled with volumes that spanned decades of her life. A ceramic dish by the door held her keys, her reading glasses, and a note that read, in her own handwriting, "You own your choices now." That evening, she hosted a small dinner. The guest list was short, deliberate. Luke and his new partner, Emily, Evelyn, of course, Marcus Cole, in what he jokingly called his retirement tux, a soft cardigan and freshly shined shoes. John arrived alone. Amber came last, carrying a bouquet of chrysanthemums in autumn colors. "Happy housewarming," she said, kissing Margaret's cheek. "Belated, I know." They sat around the dining table, laughing over roast chicken, roasted root vegetables, and Margaret's famous pear tart. The conversation, for once, flowed naturally. John spoke of his work at the nonprofit legal center, his tone quieter, humbler. Luke described his upcoming gallery showing in Providence. Emily shared stories from her teaching job at a local arts high school. Amber, more subdued than she had once been, spoke of graduate school. "Art history," she said. what I was studying before I got distracted." The word hovered in the air, heavy but unspoken. Everyone knew what she meant. After dessert, Luke raised his glass. "To Grandma Margaret," he said, his voice clear, "who taught us that it's never too late to stand up for yourself." Amber added, "and that true value isn't always visible on the surface." Margaret's heart swelled. She nodded, too moved to speak. As the evening wound down, Amber pulled Margaret aside to a quiet corner. "I have something for you," she said, reaching into her bag. She handed over a small box, velvet, pale gray. Inside was a simple silver pendant, elegant and unadorned, except for a single gleaming emerald at its center. Margaret stared at it, breath catching. "It's the ring," Amber said quickly. "I had it reset. Nothing flashy. I thought maybe you should wear it now, not hide it away for someone else's future." Margaret touched the pendant, the stone cool under her fingers. "It's beautiful." Amber hesitated. "I've been thinking a lot about that day, about why I reacted the way I did. My therapist helped me realize I've spent most of my life chasing approval through appearance, things, social capital. That gift you gave me, it scared me, because it was real, and I wasn't ready to be seen that way." Margaret listened, saying nothing. "I blamed you for everything," Amber continued. "But the truth is, you just drew the line. You reminded me of what I'd lost sight of. I still have a lot to figure out. But I know I want my relationships to be real, not just roles we play." Margaret placed a hand gently over hers. "You're not the only one who forgot what mattered. We all did." When the guests departed, John lingered to help clear the dishes. He loaded the dishwasher quietly, glancing occasionally at his mother. In the kitchen, away from the others, he finally spoke. "I visited the lake house last month." Margaret looked up, surprised. "Why?" "Closure. Maybe curiosity. The new owners changed everything. New paint, new deck, even the shoreline looks different." "Did that bother you?" "Strangely, no. It helped me realize that what I missed wasn't the house, it was what it represented. Family, connection, security. I almost ruined all of that." He rinsed a plate. "I'm sorry, Mom, for everything. For pushing, for assuming, for making your life into a project to manage." Margaret dried the plate and placed it in the cupboard. "We all make mistakes, John, some larger than others." He gave a faint, rueful smile. "I'm learning, slowly." After he left, Margaret stood on the balcony, the emerald pendant warm against her chest. The city shimmered across the river, quiet and vast. Somewhere out there, her old brownstone now housed another family. The lake house echoed with different voices, new laughter, unfamiliar routines. And here, in her small space above the Charles, Margaret was finally at peace. Her phone buzzed, a message from Amber. "Found something I think belongs to you. Can I bring it over tomorrow?" Margaret replied simply, "I'll be here." The next afternoon, Amber arrived holding a small paper bag. Her posture was more grounded than the last time, less performative, more sincere. "I was cleaning out the last of the storage boxes," she said, "and I found these." She handed the bag to Margaret. Inside were the album and a velvet pouch. Margaret opened the album first. The pages had been turned, gently worn at the edges. Inside, notes had been added, dates scribbled, new captions in Amber's handwriting. One page had a sticky note attached. "Can we talk about this recipe sometime?" She opened the pouch. The ring was there, still warm, as if the journey it had taken through misunderstanding, rejection, rediscovery had only deepened its meaning. "I thought you should keep it," Amber said. "I still have a lot to learn before I'm ready for something like that." It was always a gift, Margaret said, and gifts don't ask for readiness, only recognition. Amber hesitated at the door before leaving. Thank you for standing your ground. I didn't understand it then, but I do now. Margaret nodded. After she left, Margaret placed the ring in a new box on her dresser. Beside it sat her will, recently updated, and a letter addressed to Luke. No one else knew it was there. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a gentle rhythm. She attended Luke's gallery showing, hosted Evelyn for long lunches, and even enrolled in a short fiction writing class at the local community center, something she hadn't dared since John was a toddler. The final echo of the family storm arrived on a quiet Thursday. An email from John. Subject: Coffee? They met at a neutral cafe midway between their homes. No accusations, no power plays. I declared bankruptcy, he said, stirring his coffee. Westridge collapsed entirely. I'm sorry, she said. I'm not anymore. I needed to be stripped down to start again. I've moved in with Luke temporarily. Margaret's eyebrows lifted. He's more forgiven than I deserve, John added. He sees people, Margaret said. That's his strength. They finished their coffee. John reached awkwardly for a hug. She allowed it. Back home, Margaret opened her closet. Tucked into the top shelf was a small, unopened box. It had arrived 2 years earlier from a boutique in Paris, a gift she had planned to pass on for a future daughter-in-law. A silk shawl, hand-embroidered, ivory and delicate. She placed it in a new bag, attached a note, and set it by the door. Someday, someone would be ready for it. But today, Margaret Henderson stood at the balcony once more, winding her hair, a silver pendant at her throat. The life behind her was gone, not destroyed, just no longer hers. And the life ahead, entirely her own. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful narratives about strength, dignity, and second chances. Click the bell icon so you never miss a new story. Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, please share this video with them. Ready for more? Click on the next video and keep exploring stories that matter.